Welcome to Wavelengths, a podcast with Amphenol Broadband Solutions.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and welcome to another episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast. Always good to be here in the broadband hot seat with the ABS team as we dig into the big trends, topics, technologies, timely news, strategies, you name it, for the larger connectivity industry, and more specifically, the broadband and fiber industries. We've got a very practical episode for y'all here today. I'm really looking forward to what we're about to dig into, which is some practical playbooks on broadband training. Now, before we get into the weeds, I want to make sure that you are tapped into all of our previous content. So make sure you're subscribing to Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast, Wavelengths, on AmphenolBroadband.com. Again, head to our website, AmphenolBroadband.com. There you'll find previous episodes of the podcast, a full catalog of content, but also other resources, training, valuable materials, and of course, more information on our solutions and services. You can also subscribe to Wavelengths on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So just hit that subscribe button and you'll get notifications when we drop new episodes, and you got that full catalog to go binge on your drive to and from work. Okay, folks, let's dive in. Today's topic is a modern playbook for broadband training. Build versus buy, bench versus field. We want y'all to walk away from today's episode having a better playbook for how to approach broadband training. So if you've hired any techs lately, right, this is very much targeted for folks working and breathing in the industry. You've probably felt this, right? Networks are modernizing faster than teams can even train on those modernizations. Fiber's exploding, toolchains are shifting, customers expect first visit resolution. You better not be coming back a second and third time. The companies keeping pace aren't guessing around these fronts, okay? The companies that are at the forefront of these changes are treating training like a product, like anything else in their suite, right? But it's an internal product. Blending vendor partnerships with in-house programs, mapping skills to industry certifications, and scaling knowledge with formats that actually stick. Things like micro-learnings, hands-on benches, guided field time, mentorship, right? That's where today's guests live every day, and we're going to be pulling from them for your updated playbook here on how to approach broadband training in 2025, or, well, we're recording in December of 25, for 26, let's say, and moving forward. Amphenol Broadband Solutions trains tens of thousands of technicians worldwide across RF and fiber, from head end to premises, right? Everything in between. And ABS pairs that with manufacturer grade labs and resources as well, right? And they're at the forefront of quality training in the industry. So it's good to get to shine the spotlight internally here today and surface some great tips from our ABS team. They also sit at the intersection of industry certifications, FBA, FOA, FCTE, you name it, the realities of field work, right? They design theory that meets the industry where it's at, right? So today, we're going to unpack how to structure your training so that it drives uptime and actually levels up your techs, right? We're going to go over when to build in-house versus when to outsource, how to co-design with vendors, why third-party certs matter, creative hands-on labs, e-learning that scales, mentorship, on-the-job models. We hope to cover it all. We've got a tight time window, so we're going to pack it all in as much as we can. We hope you leave today with what feels like a true checklist that you can put to work immediately to level up your trainings. So I'm pleased to welcome our two guests from the ABS team to give us this modern playbook on broadband training. Please welcome to today's episode, Charles Dillard and Marion Nowosatko. Both are training managers at Amphenol Broadband Solutions. Charles and Marion, great to have you both on. How you doing?
Doing great, Daniel.
Doing great, Daniel. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's great to have you both here. Charles, good to reconnect. Good to have you back on the podcast. And Marion, this is your first episode, so welcome, and excited to get to, see y'all's back and forth here and surface your expertise. Let's dive right into it. Just so our audience understands, why are these guys the voices of authority on modern broadband training? Could y'all give us a little bit of insight elevator pitch here on your backgrounds in broadband, some of your experience and scope of work, and what has motivated you to step into the shoes of a teacher for this industry? Charles, we'll start with you.
Actually, last week was my 30th year in the industry, and started out as a technician and kind of made my way through the ranks, if you will, eventually, which led me into training, where I was a corporate trainer, and then for a few years, became a training supervisor. The last probably 6 or 7 years, I got into the curriculum side of the house. So instead of focusing more on training in the classroom and out in the field, I worked and managed a team of developers, and we created training primarily for field operations. So a lot of experience in not only training, but curriculum development as well.
Just like Charles, I've held many positions in the industry. I've got about 30 plus years, 33, 34 years in the industry. And I've held, again, many positions from, entry level positions to advanced level positions. I spent 20 years doing training, curriculum development prior to my prior company that I worked for, having just a curriculum development team. We used to, as trainers, not only do the training, but develop the curriculum. So spent like 20 years, like I said, 20 years doing that, and then moved into the engineering side. So I've got a little bit of background on the field side and how the training is being developed for the field and how it's being used in the field. So
fantastic. Well, all that hands-on experience, as well as we're looking at over 50 years combined experience here between the two of y'all. I think you are the voice of authority here, Charles. Let's not sell yourself short, okay? Come on, give yourself at least one gold medal here. So I love it. I'm excited to pull. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this ain't the first one. But I'm excited to pull from y'all's insights then. We've got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Again, audience, with each of these questions, I want y'all to really be thinking about how you can turn the insights from Charles and Marion here into actionable next steps that you can apply almost immediately to start to improve your broadband training. Okay, so first question. A lot of companies debate how to build out their training in the first place, right? Do they need to invest in and build their own in-house training teams, or can they outsource, or should they outsource, right? Is it worth maybe, is the maybe cheaper approach to outsourcing actually worth it? Or will you find that you don't stay up to pace on the changes impacting the industry? I mean, there's so many different nuances here. But what do y'all think are some of the advantages of having an in-house training organization versus outsourcing? Is it a choice? Do you have to choose one or the other? Are they complementary? Where should we even start to unpack this?
Right off, if you have your, your internal training program, the very first message it sends to your employees is that you're investing in their career. So if they come in the front door and there's a structured training program for them that exceeds just new hire training, meaning refresher training, as they start to progress in their career, it sends a great message. Also, you have the ability to customize the training according to your specs and your standards. Sometimes when you're working with vendors, sometimes they come with a off-the-shelf type training, and they may try to kind of customize it a little bit for you. So if speed is an issue or resources, then outsourcing may be an option. But if you have not only the capital, but the head count to have your own internal, again, the ability to tailor to your company's specs and processes is a huge advantage in doing so.
Charles hit it on the head, right? You have that control of the content more. If you have an internal training team, You can know how they're going to deploy it, how they're going to, make sure that the folks that you're training understand it, because you're seeing them where when you use an outsourcing company, you really don't have a control over that training other than what the material is. And again, like Charles said, you can nail it down a little tighter than what maybe an outsourcing company would, where, it's your specific equipment in the training, where an outsourcing company may just have like a high level overview of the equipment and what it does.
And then I guess you brought up a great point about the classroom side of it, is that oftentimes the question that comes up during training, especially in the classroom, is more geared towards company specific type of questions, meaning like what levels should things be operating, and what is our process for this when it comes to installation. So if you're using third party, those may be questions that they may not be able to answer on the fly. Whereas if it's internal, the training team is in lock and step with the engineering department, so they understand all of the engineering specifications, and they're in tune with like the supervisors and managers and what they're looking for when it comes to quality control and stuff like that. So just some more advantages of having your own internal.
Also, as those things change, it's easy to update them.
Yes.
Right? Because you own that training material, to where if it's outsourced, you've got to get with somebody, they've got to make the time to do it, and then so on and so forth.
As a quick follow-up then, if we did approach something like a blended model where you do, mostly lean on internal training, but maybe you do have some vendor partner modules or some outsourcing to help supplement your training. Do you guys have a piece of advice or a tip and trick for the right kind of balance there? Like if you are going to bring in other modules or outsource some of that training, where would it make sense to do that?
I think when you get into specific equipment, it's very important to use your vendor community, right, to outsource it. They're the experts in the equipment. Back in the day, meter readings, when we used to have to train meters, we had 3 different meters in the area that I worked in as a trainer. And it's like, you can't be an expert in all of them. The basic understanding of them, but it's important at that time to bring in your vendor community to really, because they know that meter like the back of their hand. So.
And I was going to say the same thing, but just to add to it is, in areas where the material is focused more on industry standard stuff. So, for example, like DOCSIS and what DOCSIS mean, because those things are industry standards, it makes sense to use third party for those type of things. And then that way your internal team can focus on just the specifics up to your particular company when it comes to installation practices, troubleshooting practices, etc.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for the insights and the advice on that front. All right, let's pop over to the next question, which kind of follows up neatly to what y'all were just talking about. Many companies in the broadband and telecom industry do rely heavily on vendor equipment and maybe an ecosystem of training around that equipment. What are your thoughts on how broadband and telecom companies should partner with their manufacturers to create effective training? So this is a little different than outsourcing your training. This is more like building collaborative training, managed in-house, but you're working side by side with the manufacturers and staying one step ahead of tech changes. So thoughts on how to nurture and facilitate that kind of cooperation between different entities building aligned training?
Probably the key is that, treating vendors and vendors treating MSOs and companies in the industry as a partnership. So it's not just making the sale of your product, but also being a resource and adding value. So one of the ways, like Marion mentioned earlier, and you, Daniel, is that vendors are the expert in that particular product. And the key thing is that as vendors, whatever we sell a particular company, it's in our best interest that product performs correctly. So that way we can continue that partnership. So it's in our best interest to be able to provide training specific to the product that we are providing. And that could be in many forms. It could be, showing up at tech meetings and going over, the particular product, like Marion mentioned, like with the signal level meter. Here's how ours is different than something you may have used in the past. But then also creating micro learning, like with short videos, and having an avenue that techs can pull from 2 weeks, a month after the initial training. So again, just creating additional value, but also early in, right after the sale, having the vendors come in to provide training on that particular product.
They're the experts in it, right? They're the experts with the material that you're looking for. And not only that, they may also already have material developed, right? That can be modified to fit your needs. So you don't have to start from scratch. It's not reinventing the wheel. So
sometimes it's hard to get technicians back into training once they come through new hire. Because they're already out in production, but then also there's new people coming in. So your internal training team, sometime, they're kind of filled to the max with new hire training because the company is growing or because of churn. So existing technicians, it may be difficult to get them back into training. And that's also a reason why having a partnership with vendors where maybe we can come in, like I mentioned earlier, at during tech meetings where they may have 30 minutes to give, and we can, give targeted training, and their internal trainers can focus on, the new people that are coming into the company. So just a resource for trainers.
Going out to the field where they're actually doing the work, right? And getting out with them and meeting them on the job site and say, hey, hey, look at this. Did you think of this? And also allows that vendor, outsourced trainer to learn something too. So it's a two-way street, how they're actually using the materials that they're purchasing from them. So it really helps out in both ways.
Yeah, and I think this kind of cross-company collaboration around training is pretty essential to stay ahead of new tech, new workflows, right? If you kind of wait to design your training reactively based on how you then see, new hardware deployed in the field, and kind of oh, darn, I didn't realize that our techs are going to have to relearn how to do this step or this process. If you can begin to anticipate those changes because you get to the table early with the manufacturer, you learn about the nuances of how that hardware is changing, how that device is changing, how that impacts use, and how techs need to adjust. Well, now you are, better preparing your techs to meet standard shifts in the industry instead of only reacting to them. So, great points. All right, let's jump over to upskilling now, certifications, right? Certifications have always been important, but they're becoming even more recognized in the industry, and there's more variety here. Variety isn't always good. It can muddy the waters a little bit. So let's clear things up a little bit. What are y'all's thoughts on third-party certifications? Why are they being treated as more important nowadays? Kind of what are they really signaling to the industry? When you do have one, right? And how can companies encourage their workforce to pursue them if they are important? What are y'all's thoughts?
the certification part of it is it's important. It gives technicians, a real feeling that they're being appreciated, right? And that they're learning a new skill set and improving on their skill sets. I think as they get certifications, if a company looks at certifications and has some type of reward program, everybody wants to be recognized. Doesn't matter if it's the installer to the, advanced engineer guy, right? Every time they make a step towards something and have a goal, that certification is helping them get there. And I think if a company recognizes that, they're going to have a better field of expertise in their playbook with their technicians.
I agree with everything that Marion just said. Dan, you brought up a great point when you mentioned that not all certifications are the same. So when you do have a certification program that's recognized across the industry, so without getting into like particular names, but the benefit for the, say, company is that if you have new employees that may be coming from other companies and they have these certifications, it lets that company know that, this particular person has knowledge of the industry, has been disciplined enough to go through a certification process. So that lets a potential new company who's interested in someone coming from somewhere else, it's not so much of a risk bringing them on because they feel like, hey, they, already have a leg up just trying to grab somebody off the street, maybe from another industry. The other side of that is that as an individual, life happens sometimes and you may have to, move out of state and take a job with another company. Then having those credentials like certifications can give you a leg up on the hiring process with a new company as well. So
they're not just a one company, and go, they are transferable. And like Charles said, that they're very, one's not the same as the other. So, but they are transferable.
Which in our industry, what we find out is that it's a small world in our industry, in the telecommunication industry. So again, adopting these certification and standards, whether we're talking about DOCSIS or whatever, it just makes it easier. Like Marion mentioned, transferring, people and ideas and best practices, within our industry. So same thing with certifications.
When you talk about a reward or a recognition type, it's not always about the dollar. A lot of people just like to be recognized. Hey, Charles just completed this, advanced course. It's that you're, doing something to not only that your peers will look at, but also your leadership will say, oh, Charles is going above and beyond what needs to be done, right? And he's helping us get to, it helps them also have a vision of where the industry's going and how they're going to be a big part of that. So I think that's very important for any company to have is some type of certification recognition program.
All right, next question here to make sure we keep the convo flowing. Let's jump now to the style of learning. So, I almost feel like we need to do a follow-up episode to this where we sit down with education designers, curriculum designers, because there's so many great, valuable learning lessons in the wider world of education around, how to actually make online learning useful, how to curate learning based on the individual's, most successful learning habits and methods of learning. Regardless, we're going to generalize here a little bit. For something as hands-on as broadband tech service and expertise, it would seem pretty clear that hands-on learning is what's going to stick better with technicians over a classroom session. Sit down, watch this presentation, or do this online course, and take a quiz or something. However, hands-on learning takes a lot of coordination, a lot of planning and prep. You got to get people in the same room, right? Or you got to send people out to techs. So there's some nuances and challenges there. I'm curious y'all's thoughts here on some creative ways to build successful as well as realistic hands-on labs. Like, if this is already the better way to learn, how do we make sure that if we are going to go through the steps of bringing everyone to the table together, scheduling it out, pulling all these disparate folks for a training, how do we actually make it not only useful, but also realistic to the challenges they will face out in the field? What are y'all's thoughts here?
The big thing is involve the vending manufacturer, right? They have the equipment. They're the experts, again, the experts on their equipment. And a lot of times is where, when building these training centers, if that's what we want to call them, is finding the equipment, right? Because companies don't want to give equipment up out of their warehouse that they've purchased to build a training center when it's not going to make them any revenue. So when you include the manufacturing company, a lot of times they'll give you the equipment to build it out. So the cost to build it is very inexpensive when you work with the manufacturer. So,
and to add to that, not every portion of the lab that you're building have to be functional. Sometimes you just need a mock-up of something working. So if you're doing installation of how to wire an aerial drop, then there doesn't need to be signal coming out of that particular tap. So again, like Marion mentioned, partnering with vendors, to see how they can provide some equipment, but also, your warehouse as products are, bad, and then they're stored in the warehouse, the training team can partner with the warehouse to say, hey, do you have, an active device? It doesn't have to be working, but we just want to mock it up for some training in our lab. So,
or even old equipment that's been taken out of the field, but still may be used in another location. They may have a pile of it sitting there that they're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with this? And a lot of that equipment will work for your lab mock-ups.
What worked well for us in our past life with building labs, were, especially if you have to replicate it across the country, is on the initial front, having the training department and the trainers coming together and having a trainer when it comes to labs, and then also having ideally one or two people that are responsible for standardizing the labs. Sure everybody is doing it the same way, and that's brand provide.
Very meta, right? You need good training on the training. Like, get everyone on the same page for how to run these in the field, regardless of how decentralized it is. Which, I think is healthy. Like, if you can standardize, truly decentralizing these educational modules outside of any one training manager, then you can successfully stay on top of these trends and teach your techs out in the field. So I'm really glad y'all mentioned that. That's very important. Not to sort of preempt y'all's answers here, but I'm curious y'all's thoughts on how e-learning platforms can help companies deliver consistent training at scale. Like, what role do they serve well? What role should they avoid? Especially with so many technicians in the field, we do need to find ways to scale training. And we can't just rely on bringing everyone to a workshop on a Wednesday, right? So give me y'all's thoughts there. What role should e-learning, whether that's videos, interactive quizzes, maybe even AR or VR, right? What role should this play in helping deliver consistent training, but deliver it at scale?
So probably one of the most important questions you've asked, all of them been important, but especially when it comes to e-learning, because E-learns, they are a must-have in any company's learning program, for a reason that you mentioned, Daniel. The big thing is you standardize the content no matter who hears it, no matter the location. So when important stuff like safety stuff as relates to the spacing between, where you need to be from power or stuff like that, where you want to make sure everyone understands and like specification, like how much signals you have. And so you want to make sure those things are standards, and e-learns are great with that. But briefly, what I wanted to mention about e-learns is that e-learns can be done well, the where it feels like it's hands-on, meaning that it's not so much that techs need to understand all of the answers. They need to know where to go to get information. So you can structure e-learns in a way that the e-learn that they're taking on the computer is not giving them the answer, but it can have them to go to another platform, whether it's a browser or something, to find the answer and come back to that e-learn to input the information. Because at the end of the day, we, as humans, we don't have all the answers, even if you be in a company 30, 40 years. The key is, how do you find answers when you need it and the resources? So e-learns can be done in a way that mimic that, and it doesn't have to be all giving information to technicians. So I just want to kind of champion e-learns a little bit.
Yeah, I think e-learns are a real good tool for refreshers too, right? After a tech has went through any type of training, you can use those e-learns as a refresher maybe a year down the road. Or maybe if they're having an issue with a certain area, right? Here's a quick e-learn on that. It also helps when, like you said, Daniel, that getting the techs into the office. There's a lot of places, a lot of companies that have these outside or distanced offices that may only have one or two technicians in that office. So, and it may be quite a distance to get them into the main office, right? So it helps with that too, to getting that information in front of them too. So,
yeah, and I'd imagine the best practice here is align your learning style to the necessity of what you're training on. You don't want to try to substitute something that really needs the hands-on and just try to say, well, I guess we can just do it virtually and trust they'll figure it out. I mean, maybe for some things, but some things you probably do want to ensure, like, hey, even if it takes more coordination, we got to make sure folks learn this hands-on. And maybe that's also where, it's not really ever one or the other. It's that they need to supplement and complement each other as tracks. So something that you learn virtually with an e-learning course or a video library, there should likely be some follow-up ways to ensure, did the person actually learn what they were meant to learn, and can they deploy it in practice, right? And having that kind of foresight, I imagine y'all encounter that a lot as managers for training programs. That's pretty key, right? And it's not just, okay, they completed the course, we did our job. It's, can we support our techs in making sure they can prove mastery over these concepts?
Great point. And that's where supervisors and managers play a big role in training as well, because while they're out in the field riding with them, doing, follow-ups and make sure, they're, growing in their skill set, they have the ability to provide additional hands-on that exceed the classroom. So great point.
All right. Last couple questions before we wrap things up. So on-the-job training is a whole other layer, right? Continued education. Y'all kind of mentioned this earlier too. It poses some challenges. You get someone new at the company, they've been in the industry for 15 years, and it's like, well, they don't necessarily think they need more education. They're ready to go. They're tenured. They just got the job. So put me to work, right? And how much time should you take for training someone that you just hired? And how do you train someone 10 years into the job, right? These nuances matter. So on-the-job training, I think, can sometimes be overlooked or rushed because of the pressures of how you spend your time day to day. Well, I need to be getting my job done. Do I have time to step away to train? Those pressures are real. So I'm curious what y'all see as the best practice here, some of the best ways to structure on-the-job training so that employees are learning consistently. You're always a student, but you're not slowing down productivity and you're not getting in the way of key projects, key work, etc.
For example, if you take an installer, they go through a new hire program, and then they're partnered with a technician, to ride out in the field. One of the things that worked best, and kind of going with what you said, Daniel, is that, when you're riding with a seasoned tech or whatever, they feel like, you're slowing them down and it's affecting their metric. So what we've done in my previous life was that, quickly putting that new hire in the system in production quickly. And so the technician that's riding with them, they're assisting the new person on their jobs instead of the other way around. So you take the pressure off the person that's training, thinking that it's going to affect, their metrics. And the new person has, their jobs that's assigned to them and their tech number. So once you do that, that technician, that's, the seasoned technician, they feel more inclined to take the necessary time to make sure that they're showing them and providing input. And then the new hire is not just following them around and grabbing a tool from the truck when they need it, et cetera. So if you have an opportunity to implement that in your company, that has, done exceedingly well when it comes to on-the-job training.
When you switch those roles to truly being, a mentor or a trainer, and it doesn't affect your metrics, I think that really helps drive the importance of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. The simple things of, putting on a connector, if not done correctly, what it affects over the time, or hanging a drop properly, what it affects over the time. So when you take the worriness out of it, then definitely it helps in that mentorship and training program. Productivity, that word productivity, over the years has been I feel that has been a big training killer, because it companies focus on that productivity and how that ROI is going to quickly grow, right? But it's still important, right? It's still important to make sure that your techs are trained properly and getting the right training.
All right, folks, this has been a fantastic conversation so far. Like I promised, audience, we've got some practical feedback here for y'all to put to work immediately. So thank you to the two of y'all for all the input you've given on the podcast so far. My last question for y'all before we wrap is about blended learning. So this is kind of just culminating everything we've been talking about, all these different paths for building training courses, running something online versus running it in person versus running it in-house versus outsourcing or collaboratively building it. There's so many different moving pieces to consider to build the right kind of training curriculum. But blended learning, again, is just sort of this best of both worlds, this best of all worlds, where you get to find how each little layer plays its role. So I wanted to get y'all's thoughts here in a great kind of final question. Well, you do hear a lot about blended learning these days. It's on the tip of the tongue for anyone in education, including hard skill continued education and B2B, right? So this would be mixing online courses with field practice, sometimes even literally in the same session. I'm curious y'all's thoughts on how companies should approach striking that right balance between digital and hands-on methods, especially when you are building a course that is literally feeding from one to the other. Course, the step one of course A is in person, and then step two of course A is virtual, and et cetera, et cetera. So what are y'all's thoughts here to close us out?
I think it's the big part is a company's got to have an understanding that folks don't learn the same.
Right.
Everybody learns differently. I can read through something myself and go, okay, I understand it, but I still don't know the how. Right. So you've got to get a balance of both of them, and having that understanding that people learn differently helps in that.
If you learn how to meet people where they are, and a lot of the new people that's coming into the company, they're a lot younger. They grew up with devices in their hand. So we already know that it's difficult once they're in production. And I hate using that term, like, it's an assembly line, but, once they're out of new hire training and they're doing positive work, it's hard to get them back in the classroom. So any opportunity that we can meet them where they are, meaning providing content, information to their devices, it's going to do wonders for your company. I know a lot of companies, when techs are out in the field on the jobs, they have different statuses. They can be on the job, they can be at lunch. Some companies have where they could be in training. So if they have the ability in between jobs to go on a training status, and then they can go to a URL in the company's LMS and take a 5 or 10 minute training, whether it's a refresher or a training from a vendor, and then they can log back in to go on to their next job. That way you save a lot of time from having them to drive back to the office, sit in front of a classroom, and actually get that information. So, and another thing with the blended approach is that if you treat training in like two different buckets, what are things that can't be accomplished without the hands-on, then you want to structure hands-on training around that and use your trainers primarily for content. But what are things that are standard, no matter who's doing it, meaning like, theory and safety stuff. Then you want to use blended videos, micro learnings, for those type of things. And if you can treat those into those two separate buckets, then you can create an effective blended training program.
I love those distinctions. I'm going to take note of that myself as our education lead here at Market Scale. Time to put some of that methodology to work and learn from the best here. So, all right, folks, I think we're done here with today's episode. Thank you to the two of you for y'all's input, direction, experience, and best practices. Again, folks, we've been chatting with Charles Dillard and Marion Nowosatko. Both are training managers at Amphenol Broadband Solutions. Charles, Marion, if folks want to stay in touch, get in touch, pick your brain a little bit more for training best practices, how can they get in touch?
You can follow us on LinkedIn. Like you mentioned, Daniel, or going to the Amphenol Broadband site. We have a YouTube channel where you can find a lot of training content from cable 101 to fiber optic programs. So we're everywhere, and we can be everywhere. So
beautiful. Well, I'll say goodbye one by one here. Charles, man, thank you again for joining us. Real pleasure having you back on the podcast. It's been a treat hearing from you today.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite, Daniel.
And Marion, great to have you for the first time here. Looking forward to more. Hopefully we have this trio surface more often, because these are always very practical, and I know our audience learns a ton. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, and great conversation. Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Wavelengths. Again, folks, you've got your modern playbook for broadband training laid out here. Pull the transcript, throw it into GPT, and cook yourself up a little checklist for action items before the end of the year that you can implement to level up your broadband training. So, folks, hope you took notes, hope you put this to work, and I'm looking forward to more of these. But again, make sure that you're subscribing to our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure that you're heading to our website, amphenolbroadband.com. Again, amphenolbroadband.com. All for more episodes of the show, to make sure you don't miss out on future updates, to tap into all of our previous great discussions with the ABS team and with the wider broadband community for some punchy thought leadership. And folks, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. I'm Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wavelengths.